Welcome to Exploration Dreamland, a quiet read aloud of the writings of explorers of the real world and the worlds of imagination. Drop anchor, relax into your comfortable bunk, and drift off to Dreamland with us as we read a lightly edited version of Pioneer Work in Opening the Medical Profession to Women, Autobiographical Sketches by Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell, published in 1895. The book will be read in order, so if you would like to begin at the beginning, please start with Season 2, Episode 26. A quick content note. Dr. Blackwell was an abolitionist, and in her years as a teacher, she did spend some time in places where slavery was an accepted practice. This episode will include occasional descriptions of enslaved people. Because she used the most respectful terminology that existed at the time, we have edited some passages to reflect current trends in language. If you prefer to avoid the subject, please rejoin us at episode 29. If you would like to stay in touch between episodes, you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook at Exploration Dreamland. If you would like to recommend a text, please email us at explorationdreamland, all one word, @gmail.com. You can also find our episodes on YouTube. Please subscribe or follow, and review us wherever you find us. Your actions will help others find us too. Now, take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, relax any tension in your muscles. Close your eyes, snuggle into your sleeping space, and listen to tonight's tale. Charleston, February 28, 1847. My dear Mother, 2 letters from you within a 12-month seems as extraordinary as it is welcome. I was much gratified by the kind home voices which greeted my birthday. I always think of old family times on that day. The penny for each year which Father used laughingly to bestow, and the silver that came after, and then the little children's party, and all the merry old times. But I am quite satisfied that my childhood has gone. I never wish to recall it, happy as it was. I want to be up and doing, not simply enjoying myself, and if I never succeed in accomplishing all my intentions, I mean to have the comfortable assurance that I have tried hard and done my best. Your letter, besides its highly respected religious advice, which I always lay up carefully in a little scented corner of my mind, contains many little interesting domestic items. How I should like to tap at the window some night, while the brilliant solar lamp is illuminating the planets and glorifying the cheerful faces inside, and make you all start as if you saw a ghost, till a most substantial shaking of the hand should convince you to the contrary. We have had a very mild winter on the whole, to my no small delight, for I dreaded the cold exceedingly in this great house, where the wind rushes grievously through every door and window, and finds only the ghost of a fire to warm it, and where heavy mists from the ocean chill the very marrow of your bones. I've fortunately had no broken chilblains on my hands this winter, and as I teach in the warmest room in the house, and throw open the shutters to let in all the sunshine, I don't often have to wear my blanket, but get along pretty comfortably. I am teaching at present more than 8 hours a day, and you may imagine I get pretty tired by tea time. Such a press of teaching, however, will not last very long, and I am quite willing that Mrs. Dupre should gain as much as possible by me while I am with her. About a week ago, I received an answer from the old Quaker physician, Dr. Warrington of Philadelphia, to whom I was introduced by Mrs. Willard of Troy some time ago. The letter is quite an original. I must transcribe a little for your benefit. My dear E. Blackwell, thy letter of November 18 came duly to hand. It has indeed remained unanswered, but not unheeded. I have reflected much on the propositions contained in it. So strong a hold has the communication had on my feelings and sympathies that I feared I might speak imprudently if I should reply impromptu to such noble sentiments. I have myself been so circumstanced in life as to be rendered measurably competent to understand the force of promptings to move in somewhat new and little tried paths. My immediate response would therefore perhaps have been, "Go onwards," and though if in reasonings with flesh and blood in this matter I may appear less ardent in my encouragement, let it be borne in mind that he who puts forth can, without fail, lead his devoted servants. He can make a way where there appeared no way. He can accomplish his purposes by instruments of his own selection in the bringing about his own ends. God shall work, and who shall let, hinder, or prevent him? Now, this principle is recognizable by the pious of all denominations. It is one which has been found operative in very many important enterprises, and it is one which thy own mind seems so firmly to have settled that I scarcely need advert to it now, but to show that my own faith may sometimes be so feeble that I enter into human calculation as to the expediency of certain plans of operation which have suggested themselves to me in the course of my movements about this great city, or when I am reflecting upon the condition of humanity at large. Now, I frankly confess that it is in such a balance that I have from time to time weighed thy interesting concern. I have personally appealed to some of the most intelligent and liberal-minded ladies of my acquaintance how far the services of a well-educated female physician would be appreciated by them. The response uniformly is, Mrs. Gove and Mrs. Wright were unfit to teach, nor could any female become acceptable to us either as a teacher or practitioner of medicine. This language is stronger than I should be willing to use myself. It is an interesting matter of history, and one which may afford some encouragement to reformers to persevere when they are assured that their cause has its foundation in truth, justice, and mercy. That Saul, who had been most bitter in his persecution of Christians, joining in the popular outcry against the great innovator, not only himself became a convert to the new faith, but under the name of Paul, for the balance of his active life, employed his powerful talents in the extension of the very doctrines which in his misguided zeal he had labored to subvert. I confess, my dear lady, that I with thee see many difficulties in the way to the attainment, firstly, to the acquisition of the kind and amount of education thou art aware is necessary as a capital stock with which to begin the enterprise which has been opened to thy mind. Secondly, that after years spent in the attempt, the popular mind will be found barred against thy mission of love and humanity. But I beg thee to believe with me that if the project be of divine origin and appointment, it will sooner or later surely be accomplished. Thus, in the language of Gamaliel on another occasion, quote, "If this work be of men, it will come to naught. But if it be of God, ye cannot overthrow it, lest haply ye be found even to fight against God." End quote. In now addressing thee personally, I cordially reiterate the invitation. I should be happy to compare notes with thee at any leisure moment which may be afforded me, though I am in the whirl of occupation. And if our conferences together thou shouldest become as persuaded as I am that woman was designed to be the helpmeet for man, and that in the responsible duties of relieving ills which flesh is heir to, it is appropriate that man be the physician and woman the nurse, it may possibly occur to thee that thy real mission in this world of probation will be to contribute with all the talents which thy Father in heaven has so bountifully bestowed the exaltation of a portion of thy sex to the holy duties of nursing the sick, and thus succoring the distressed, with sentiments of most respectful consideration. This is a portion of the good doctor's letter, and though our opinions differ considerably, I cannot complain of his treating the matter too lightly. He seems to be an honest, simple-minded, enthusiastic old man, and I feel as if I might regard him as a friend in Philadelphia. The letter is copied by his wife in a clear, pretty hand, so I consider her as interested also. Well, my dear mother, I wish I could tell you something amusing, but though we do a good deal of small laughing, it would hardly be worth while to put our jokes down on paper. Miss Buell and I talk of hiring a beau if we can get one cheap. For these really beautiful moonlight nights, a walk on the Battery would be very pleasant, and a visit to the opera that is now in town would be by no means disagreeable. But now we have to sit at our window and admire the moonlight on the waters, and sigh in vain after the vanities of the world, all for want of a beau, alas, poor nuns that we are. Then sometimes the girls get up a little screaming for our benefit. The other night, for instance, the 10 o'clock bell had rung. Miss Buell had seen that the lights were out and the girls in bed. We were comfortably sinking into forgetfulness on our pillows when I fancied I heard some poor dog yelling in some yard. I listened sympathizingly, and found it was a human voice in the distance, uttering at short intervals a succession of agonized shrieks. I was horrified and indignant. We listened. The shrieks seemed to draw nearer. "Why, Miss Buell, 'tis certainly the girls in the opposite room." "Oh, no, they are all asleep. 'Tis Sonny's voice downstairs. They must be washing him." At this time of night, what an idea! I'm convinced it is the girls. The shrieks increased, and at intervals we distinguished the words, "Oh, Penny, Penny Grimke! Oh, Miss Buell, Miss Blackwell, Mrs. Peters! Oh, Mrs. Peters!" I jumped out of bed, got a light, and hurried into the opposite room. As I opened the door, the noise almost stunned me. There were 6 girls, all screaming at the top of their voices, as pale as their nightgowns, and some of them almost in fits. All the other doors were thrown open, and I was immediately surrounded by a perfect mob of girls in white nightgowns and caps, talking, crying, laughing, in a regular uproar. I threatened to blow out the lamp if they wouldn't hush, and at last I got at the origin of the affray. A couple of brushes had fallen on the floor, and one of the girls, affirming that somebody had touched her arm, began to scream. All the others joined in, and I really believe that if I had not gone to them when I did, they would have fallen into convulsions, so completely had they given themselves up to terror. These are some of the pleasant diversions of our life, and as I welcome anything that makes me laugh, they are quite acceptable. When the hot weather arrived, I superintended the summer school, which for the health of the pupils was removed to Aiken, South Carolina, amongst the pine barrens, a spot renowned for its healthiness and which has since become a famous health resort. Aiken, July 1846. Many happy returns, dear M, of your birthday. I send you the old greeting, old and full of meaning, for life is a blessing, though our low, unworthy view may make us sometimes doubt it. Even if life were full of suffering and annihilation its end, I should still hail it as a noble gift. But with a firm faith in infinite goodness and immortality, the most wearisome life becomes a source of triumphant thanksgiving. So I wish you again many happy returns of glorious life. And now I must thank you right heartily for a letter that was a real home gift, or, as the Dial saith, a letter that was no letter, but a leaf out of the book of nature. How do your commentatical studies go on? I am afraid it will be an unsatisfactory sort of business to search for the sun with a parcel of rushlights. If it do not glow forth with unmistakable brilliancy, I fear there's very little true solar light to be found. Last Sunday, not caring to pay the Episcopal Church a second visit, I told Mrs. Dupre I would go to a church in the woods, so she need not send the carriage back for me. I had seen a dark wooden building with little steeple half hidden amongst the trees that took my fancy, so I dressed and strolled through the sandy wood paths at the rate of a mile an hour, as I hate overheating myself. I reached my church at length when, lo, it proved to be a deserted schoolhouse containing 2 large cool rooms built of weather-beaten pine with projecting roof and pleasant elevated porch. Here I took my seat whilst the village bells were ringing merrily. The schoolhouse was situated in the midst of pretty woods, encircled by a path of white sand which winds through the woods to the village. The sky was brilliantly blue. The rich odor of the pines and the hum of insects had a very soothing effect, and I spent my time so pleasantly that I think I shall be tempted to pay my church in the woods many visits this summer. By the by, I find that the schoolhouse, cool and pleasant as it is, has been for some time deserted, because the 3 denominations of Aiken cannot agree on the choice of a teacher. I have found the summer here very pleasant hitherto. Indeed, I invite you all to come south and get cool. I think I have never suffered so little from the heat anywhere. November. Let me set your mind at ease with regard to my fastidiousness, love of beauty, professional horrors, and so forth. My mind is fully made up. I have not the slightest hesitation on the subject. The thorough study of medicine I am quite resolved to go through with. The horrors and disgusts I have no doubt of vanquishing. I have overcome stronger distastes than any that now remain, and feel fully equal to the contest. As to the opinion of people, I don't care one straw personally, though I take so much pains, as a matter of policy, to propitiate it, and shall always strive to do so. For I see continually how the highest good is eclipsed by the violent or disagreeable forms which contain it. I think you attribute a foolish sentimental fastidiousness to me that I do not possess. You also speak of my want of bodily sympathy being an objection. If I understand what you mean, I think it would prove of the most valuable assistance possible. I suspect you were thinking of that unlucky dose of lobelia I once gave you when I grew angry because you groaned and obstinately refused to drink the warm stuff that would relieve you. I think I have sufficient hardness to be entirely unaffected by great agony in such a way as to impair the clearness of thought necessary for bringing relief. But I am sure the warmest sympathy would prompt me to relieve suffering to the extent of my power, though I do not think any case would keep me awake at night, or that the responsibility would seem too great when I had conscientiously done my best. I want very much to have a little story printed which I have translated from the German. It is very pretty and pleases the children greatly. I might get $100 for it. Aiken is almost deserted, but I shall not go down till the 15th, when the Episcopal minister arrives to take charge of the school. Tomorrow I shall be left entirely alone, not a soul in the house besides. The autumn winds are howling round the house, blowing the leaves in whirlwinds. Our fall has been very pleasant, though we've had fires for several weeks. The changing trees had a curious effect for a few days. I have 4 windows in my room, and the hickory trees outside turned a brilliant yellow, filling the room with a beautiful glow. During a very rainy day, I several times looked up with joy, thinking the sun was breaking forth. But the rain soon changed their beauty, and now our pines and some oaks are the only cheerful things left. Returning to Charleston, the winter and spring were fully occupied with teaching, the Christmas being cheered by the receipt from home of our Family Christmas Annual, a collection of articles in prose and verse specially prepared anonymously by the various members of the family and decorated by domestic artists. This diversion was continued for many years, and several volumes are still preserved as mementos of those pleasant times. Chapter 3. Study in America, 1847 to 1849. In the summer of 1847, with my carefully hoarded earnings, I resolved to seek an entrance into a medical school. Philadelphia was then considered the chief seat of medical learning in America, so to Philadelphia I went, taking passage in a sailing vessel from Charleston for the sake of economy. In Philadelphia, I boarded in the family of Dr. William Elder. He and his admirable wife soon became warm and steadfast friends. Dr. Elder, author of The Life of Dr. Kane, the Arctic Voyager, was a remarkable man, of brilliant talent and genial nature. He took a generous interest in my plans, helping by his advice and encouragement through the months of effort and refusals which were now encountered. Applications were cautiously but persistently made to the 4 medical colleges of Philadelphia for admission as a regular student. The interviews with their various professors were by turns hopeful and disappointing. Whilst pursuing these inquiries, I commenced my anatomical studies in the private school of Dr. Allen. This gentleman, by his thoughtful arrangements, enabled me to overcome the natural repulsion to these studies generally felt at the outset. With a tact and delicacy for which I have always felt grateful, he gave me my first lesson in practical anatomy, a demonstration of the human wrist. The beauty of the tendons and exquisite arrangements of this part of the body struck my artistic sense and appealed to the sentiment of reverence with which this anatomical branch of study was ever afterwards invested in my mind. During the following months, whilst making applications to the different medical colleges of Philadelphia for admission as a regular student, I enlisted the services of my friends in the search for an alma mater. The interviews with the various professors, though disappointing, were often amusing. Extracts from the Journal of 1847. May 27. Called on Dr. Jackson, one of the oldest professors in Philadelphia, a small, bright-faced, gray-haired man who looked up from his newspaper and saluted me with, "Well, what is it? What do you want?" I told him I wanted to study medicine. He began to laugh and asked me why. Then I detailed my plans. He became interested, said he would not give me an answer then, that there were great difficulties, but he did not know that they were insurmountable. He would let me know on Monday. I came home with a lighter heart, though I can hardly say I hope. On Monday, Dr. Jackson said he had done his best for me, but the professors were all opposed to my entrance. Dr. Horner advised me to try the Filbert Street and Franklin schools. A professor of Jefferson College thought it would be impossible to study there, and advised the New England schools. June 2. Felt gloomy as thunder, trudging round to Dr. Darroch. He is the most non-committal man I ever saw. I harangued him, and he sat full 5 minutes without a word. I asked at last if he could give me any encouragement. "The subject is a novel one, madam. I have nothing to say either for or against it. You have awakened trains of thought upon which my mind is taking action, but I cannot express my opinion to you either one way or another." "Your opinion, I fear, is unfavorable." "I did not say so. I beg you, madam, distinctly to understand that I express no opinion one way or another. The way in which my mind acts in this matter I do not feel at liberty to unfold." "Shall I call on the other professors of your college?" "I cannot take the responsibility of advising you to pursue such a course." "Can you not grant me admittance to your lectures, as you do not feel unfavorable to my scheme?" "I have said no such thing. Whether favorable or unfavorable, I have not expressed any opinion, and I beg leave to state clearly that the operation of my mind in regard to this matter I do not feel at liberty to unfold." I got up in despair, leaving his mind to take action on the subject at his leisure. Dr. Warrington told me that he had seen his friend Dr. Ashmead, who had told him that Paris was such a horrible place that I must give up my wish for a medical education. Indeed, his communication would be so unfavorable that he would rather not meet me in person. I told the doctor that if the path of duty led me to hell, I would go there, and I did not think that by being with devils I should become a devil myself, at which the good doctor stared. Nevertheless, I shrink extremely from the idea of giving up the attempt in America and going to France, although the suggestion is often urged on me. The fear of successful rivalry, which at that time often existed in the medical mind, was expressed by the dean of one of the smaller schools, who frankly replied to the application, quote, "You cannot expect us to furnish you with a stick to break our heads with." End quote. So revolutionary seemed the attempt of a woman to leave a subordinate position and seek to obtain a complete medical education. A similarly mistaken notion of the rapid practical success which would attend a lady doctor was shown later by one of the professors of my medical college, who was desirous of entering into partnership with me on condition of sharing profits over $5,000 on my first year's practice. During these fruitless efforts, my kindly Quaker adviser, whose private lectures I attended, said to me, "Elizabeth, it is of no use trying. Thee cannot gain admission to these schools. Thee must go to Paris and don masculine attire to gain the necessary knowledge." Curiously enough, this suggestion of disguise made by good Dr. Warrington was also given me by Dr. Pankhurst, the professor of surgery in the largest college in Philadelphia. He thoroughly approved of a woman's gaining complete medical knowledge. He told me that although my public entrance into the classes was out of the question, yet if I would assume masculine attire and enter the college, he could entirely rely on 2 or 3 of his students to whom he should communicate my disguise, who would watch the class and give me timely notice to withdraw should my disguise be suspected. But neither the advice to go to Paris nor the suggestion of disguise tempted me for a moment. It was to my mind a moral crusade on which I had entered, a course of justice and common sense, and it must be pursued in the light of day, and with public sanction, in order to accomplish its end. The following letter to Mrs. Willard of Troy, the well-known educationalist, describes the difficulties through which the young student had to walk warily. Philadelphia, May 24. I cannot refrain from expressing my obligations to you for directing me to the excellent Dr. Warrington. He has allowed me to visit his patients, attend his lectures, and make use of his library, and has spoken to more than one medical friend concerning my wishes. But with deep regret I am obliged to say that all the information hitherto obtained serves to show me the impossibility of accomplishing my purpose in America. I find myself rigidly excluded from the regular college routine, and there is no thorough course of lectures that can supply its place. The general sentiment of the physicians is strongly opposed to a woman's intruding herself into the profession. Consequently, it would be perhaps impossible to obtain private instruction, but if that were possible, the enormous expense would render it impracticable. And where the feelings of the profession are strongly enlisted against such a scheme, the museums, libraries, hospitals, and all similar aids would be closed against me. In view of these and numerous other difficulties, Dr. Warrington is discouraged and joins with his medical brethren in advising me to give up the scheme. But a strong idea, long cherished till it has taken deep root in the soul and become an all-absorbing duty, cannot thus be laid aside. I must accomplish my end. I consider it the noblest and most useful path that I can tread, and if one country rejects me, I will go to another. Through Dr. Warrington and other sources, I am informed that my plan can be carried out in Paris, though the free government lectures delivered by the faculty are confined to men, and a diploma is strictly denied to a woman, even when, as in one instance, as it is said, she has gone through the course in male attire. Yet every year thorough courses of lectures are delivered by able physicians on every branch of medical knowledge, to which I should be admitted without hesitation and treated with becoming respect. The true place for study, then, seems open to me, but here again some friendly physicians raise stronger objections than ever. You, a young unmarried lady, they say, go to Paris, that city of fearful immorality, where every feeling will be outraged and insult attend you at every step, where vice is the natural atmosphere, and no young man can breathe it without being contaminated. Impossible. You are lost if you go. Now, dear madam, I appeal to you, who have had the opportunity of studying the French in their native land. Is not this a false view, a greatly exaggerated fear? Is it not perfectly true everywhere that a woman who respects herself will be respected by others, that where the life is directed by a strong, pure motive to a noble object, in a quiet, dignified, but determined manner, the better feelings of mankind are enlisted, and the woman excites esteem and respectful sympathy? To my mind, this is perfectly clear, and I trust that your more experienced judgment will confirm my opinion. Probably, then, if all the information which I am still collecting agree with what I have already received, I may sail for France in the course of the summer, that I may familiarize myself with a rapid French delivery before the commencement of the winter lectures. I have tried to look every difficulty steadily in the face. I find none which seem to me unconquerable, and with the blessing of Providence, I trust to accomplish my design. After a short, refreshing trip with my family to the seaside, the search was again renewed in Philadelphia. But applications made for admission to the medical schools both of Philadelphia and of New York were met with similarly unsuccessful results. I therefore obtained a complete list of all the smaller schools of the northern states, country schools, as they were called. I examined their prospectuses and quite at a venture sent in applications for admission to 12 of the most promising institutions, where full courses of instruction were given under able professors. The result was awaited with much anxiety, as the time for the commencement of the winter sessions was rapidly approaching. No answer came for some time. At last, to my immense relief, though not surprise, for failure never seemed possible, I received the following letter from the medical department of a small university town in the western part of the state of New York. Geneva, October 20, 1847. To Elizabeth Blackwell, Philadelphia. I am instructed by the faculty of the Medical Department of Geneva University to acknowledge receipt of yours of 3rd. A quorum of the faculty assembled last evening for the first time during the session, and it was thought important to submit your proposal to the class of students who have had a meeting this day and acted entirely on their own behalf without any interference on the part of the faculty. I send you the result of their deliberations and need only add that there are no fears but that you can, by judicious management, not only disarm criticism, but elevate yourself without detracting in the least from the dignity of the profession. Wishing you success in your undertaking, which some may deem bold in the present state of society, I subscribe myself, yours respectfully, Charles A. Lee, Dean of the Faculty, 15 Geneva Hotel. This letter enclosed the following unique and manly letter, which I had afterwards copied on parchment and esteem one of my most valued possessions. At a meeting of the entire medical class of Geneva Medical College, held this day, October 20, 1847, the following resolutions were unanimously adopted. 1. Resolved, that one of the radical principles of a republican government is the universal education of both sexes, that to every branch of scientific education the door should be open equally to all, that the application of Elizabeth Blackwell to become a member of our class meets our entire approbation, and in extending our unanimous invitation, we pledge ourselves that no conduct of ours shall cause her to regret her attendance at this institution. 2. Resolved, that a copy of these proceedings be signed by the chairman and transmitted to Elizabeth Blackwell. T. J. Stratton, Chairman. With an immense sigh of relief and aspiration of profound gratitude to Providence, I instantly accepted the invitation and prepared for the journey to Western New York State. Leaving Philadelphia on November 4, I hastened through New York, traveled all night, and reached the little town of Geneva at 11 p.m. on November 6. The next day, after a refreshing sleep, I sallied forth for an interview with the dean of the college, enjoying the view of the beautiful lake on which Geneva is situated, notwithstanding the cold, drizzling, windy day. After an interview with the authorities of the college, I was duly inscribed on the list as student number 130 in the medical department of the Geneva University. I at once established myself in a comfortable boarding house in the same street as my college and 3 minutes' walk from it, a beautiful walk along the high bank overlooking the lake. I hung my room with dear mementos of absent friends, and soon with hope and zeal and thankful feelings of rest, I settled down to study. Naturally, some little time was required to adjust the relations of the new student to her unusual surroundings. My first experiences are thus given in a letter to a sister. Geneva, November 9, 1847. I've just finished copying the notes of my last lecture. Business is over for today. I throw a fresh stick into my airtight, and now for refreshment by a talk with my own dear sister. Your letter containing ease was the first to welcome me in my new residence. Right welcome, I assure you, it was, for I was gloomy, very. It was on Monday evening your letter came, my first work day in Geneva. It had rained incessantly. I was in an upper room of a large boarding house without a soul to speak to. I had attended 5 lectures, but nevertheless I did not know whether I could do what I ought to, for the professor of anatomy was absent and had been spoken of as a queer man. The demonstrator hesitated as to my dissecting. I had no books and didn't know where to get any, and my head was bewildered with running about the great college building, never going out of the same door I went in at. This evening, however, I have finished my second day's lectures. The weather is still gloomy, but I feel sunshiny and happy, strongly encouraged, with a grand future before me, and all owing to a fat little fairy in the shape of the professor of anatomy. This morning, on repairing to the college, I was introduced to Dr. Webster, the professor of anatomy, a little plump man, blunt in manner and very voluble. He shook me warmly by the hand, said my plan was capital. He had some fun, too, about a lady pupil, for he never lost a joke. The class had acted manfully, their resolutions were as good as a political meeting, etc. He asked me what branches I had studied. I told him all but surgery. "Well," said Dr. Lee, "do you mean to practice surgery?" "Why, of course she does," broke in Dr. Webster. "Think of the cases of femoral hernia. Only think what a well-educated woman would do in a city like New York. Why, my dear sir, she'd have her hands full in no time. Her success would be immense. Yes, you'll go through the course and get your diploma with great éclat, too. We'll give you the opportunities. You'll make a stir, I can tell you." I handed him a note of introduction from Dr. Warrington, and then he told me to wait in the anteroom while he read it to the medical class, who were assembled in the amphitheater for his lecture, which was to be preparatory to one of the most delicate operations in surgery, and I suppose he wanted to remind them of their promise of good behavior. I could hear him reading it. When his age and experience were spoken of, there was a shout of laughter, for he can't be more than 45 and not much of dignity about him. But at the conclusion there was a round of applause, after which I quietly entered, and certainly have no reason to complain of medical students, for though they eye me curiously, it is also in a very friendly manner. After the lecture was over, the demonstrator, who now shows the utmost friendliness, explained to me at the doctor's request a very important subject which I had lost. It was admirably done, illustrated on the subject, and if today's lessons were a fair specimen, I certainly shall have no cause to complain of my anatomical instructors. The plan pursued here is admirable, and New York and Philadelphia may learn more than one lesson from Geneva. Dr. Webster came to me laughing after the first lecture, saying, "You attract too much attention, Miss Blackwell. There was a very large number of strangers present this afternoon. I shall guard against this in future." "Yes," said Dr. Lee, "we were saying today that this step might prove quite a good advertisement for the college. If there were no other advantage to be gained, it will attract so much notice. I shall bring the matter into the medical journals. Why, I'll venture to say in 10 years' time, 1/3 the classes in our colleges will consist of women. After the precedent you will have established, people's eyes will be opened." Now, all this kind feeling encourages me greatly, and I need it, for though my purpose has never wavered, a flat, heavy feeling was growing upon me from constant disappointment. I was fast losing that spring of hope that is so pleasant. Consequently, praise cannot make me vain, and the notice I attract is a matter of perfect indifference. I sit quietly in this large assemblage of young men, and they might be women or mummies for aught I care. I sometimes think I'm too much disciplined, but it is certainly necessary for the position I occupy. I believe the professors don't exactly know in what species of the human family to place me, and the students are a little bewildered. The other people at first regarded me with suspicion, but I am so quiet and gentle that suspicion turns to astonishment, and even the little boys in the street stand still and stare as I pass. 'Tis droll. Sometimes I laugh, sometimes I feel a little sad, but in Geneva the 9 days' wonder soon will cease, and I cannot but congratulate myself on having found at last the right place for my beginning. I had not the slightest idea of the commotion created by my appearance as a medical student in the little town. Very slowly, I perceived that a doctor's wife at the table avoided any communication with me, and that as I walked backwards and forwards to college, the ladies stopped to stare at me as at a curious animal. I afterwards found that I had so shocked Geneva propriety that the theory was fully established either that I was a bad woman whose designs would gradually become evident, or that, being insane, an outbreak of insanity would soon be apparent. Feeling the unfriendliness of the people, though quite unaware of all this gossip, I never walked abroad, but hastening daily to my college as to a sure refuge, I knew when I shut the great doors behind me that I shut out all unkindly criticism, and I soon felt perfectly at home amongst my fellow students. Stay tuned for the next segment from Pioneer Work in Opening the Medical Profession to Women by Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell. Please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast app. Keep in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and recommend us to anyone you know who could use a quiet break or a little help falling asleep. Exploration Dreamland is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Sarah Van Zaley. A big thank you to Project Gutenberg for helping me find this and many other interesting publications. Thanks also to Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com for providing the theme music for this show. The title of this piece is Kalimba Relaxation Music, if you would like to visit his website to hear it in its entirety. Sweet dreams.